Alright, Mel, you're going to be my audio test subject. Let me know how we're doing. Will I find my place again? Where were we? We were in Rivendell. And we're going to start. No delays. How's the audio sound? Do I sound like I'm yelling at you compared to the music? Or does the music sound like I'm yelling at you? It's really hard to do this from my side. Yeah, I'll work on that. Maybe I'll turn me up or I'll turn it down a little bit. Am I screaming in your ears? Because I know we had that issue last time. I had somebody turned down, but I can't remember. Not muffled, okay. Well, I'll take the music down a little more. Good. Thank you very much. We had just finished with the Council of Elrond. Bilbo being Bilbo. My boy Elrond, who is like 5,000 years old, not really a boy, but whatever. Okay. Let's get these earphones off, don't need them. There's a little ASMR. There we go. Okay. Wow, it's been a while. So, The Ring Goes South, Chapter 3. Point 2, I suppose. Later that day, the hobbits held a meeting of their own in Bilbo's room. Merry and Pippin were indignant when they heard that Sam had crept into the council and had been chosen as Frodo's companion. "That's most unfair," said Pippin. "Instead of throwing him out and clapping him in chains, Elrond goes and rewards him for his cheek." Move my keyboard. I was getting dangerously close to getting sat on. "Rewards," said Frodo. "I can't imagine a more severe punishment. You're not thinking what you're saying. Condemned to go on this hopeless journey a reward? Yesterday I dreamed that my task was done and I could rest here a long while, perhaps for good. I don't wonder, said Mary. Hush. And I wish you could, but we are envying Sam, not you. If you have to go, then it will be a punishment for any of us to be left behind, even in Rivendell. We've come a long way with you and been through some stiff times. We want to go on. That's what I meant, said Pippin. We hobbits ought to stick together, and we will. I shall go, unless they chain me up. There must be someone with intelligence in the party. And you certainly will not be chosen, Peregrine Took, said Gandalf, looking in through the window, which was near the ground. But you are all worrying yourselves unnecessarily. Nothing is decided yet. Nothing decided, cried Pippin. Then what were you all doing? You were shut up for hours. Talking, said Bilbo. There was a deal of talk, and everyone had an eye-opener, even old Gandalf. I think Legolas's bit of news about Gollum caught even him on the hop, though he passed it off. You were wrong, said Gandalf. You were inattentive. I'd already heard of it from Gwaihir. That's a name, Gwaihir. If you want to know, the only real eye-openers, as you put it, were you and Frodo. And I was the only one that was not surprised. Well, anyway, said Bilbo, nothing was decided beyond choosing poor Frodo and Sam, and I was afraid all the time that it might come to that, if I was let off. But if you ask me, Elrond will send out a fair number when the reports come in. Have they started yet, Gandalf? Yes, said the wizard. Some of the scouts have been sent out already. More will go tomorrow. Elrond is sending elves, and they will get in touch with the rangers, and maybe with Thranduil's folk in Mirkwood, and Aragorn has gone with Elrond's sons. We shall have to scour the lands all round for many long leagues before any move is made. So cheer up, Frodo. You'll probably make quite a long stay here. Ah, said Sam gloomily. We'll wait just long enough for winter to come. That can't be helped, said Bilbo. It's your fault, partly, Frodo, my lad, insisting on waiting for my birthday. A funny way of honoring it, I can't help thinking. Not the day I should have chosen for letting the SBs into Bag End. But there it is. You can't wait now till spring, and you can't go till the reports come back. And in the middle of that, he just breaks into a song or a poem. When winter first begins to bite, and stones crack in the frosty night, when pools are black and trees are bare, 'tis evil in the wild to fare. But I'm afraid will be just your luck. Damn, guys, you're really just laying it on, huh? I'm afraid it will, said Gandalf. We can't start until we found out about the riders. I thought they were all destroyed in the flood, said Mary. You cannot destroy ringwraiths like that, said Gandalf. The power of their master is in them, and they stand or fall by him. I hoped they were all unhorsed and unmasked, and so made for a while less dangerous, but we must find out for certain. In the meantime, you should try and forget your troubles, Frodo. I do not know if I can do anything to help you, but I will whisper this in your ears. Someone said that intelligence would be needed in the party. He was right. I think I shall come with you. So great was Frodo's delight at this announcement that Gandalf left the windowsill, where he had been sitting, and took off his hat and bowed. I only say, I think I shall come. Do not count on anything yet, especially where Gandalf is concerned, as we all know. In this matter, Elrond will have much to say, and your friend the Strider, which reminds me, I want to see Elrond. I must be off. How long do you think I shall have here? Said Frodo to Bilbo when Gandalf had gone. Oh, I don't know. I can't count days in Rivendell, said Bilbo. But quite long, I should think. We can have many a good talk. What about helping with my book, and making a start on the next? Have you thought of an ending? Yes, several, and all are dark and unpleasant, said Frodo. Oh, that won't do, said Bilbo. Books ought to have good endings. How would this do? And they all settled down and lived happily together ever after. We'll do well if it ever comes to that, said Frodo. Ah, said Sam, and where will they live? That's what I often wonder. For a while the hobbits continued to talk and think of the past journey and of the perils that lay ahead. But such was the virtue of the land of Rivendell that soon all fear and anxiety was lifted from their minds. The future, good or ill, was not forgotten, but ceased to have any power over the present. Health and hope grew strong in them, and they were content with each good day as it came, taking pleasure in every meal and in every word and song. So the days slipped away, as each morning dawned bright and fair, and each evening followed cool and clear. But autumn was waning fast. Slowly the golden light faded to pale silver, and the lingering leaves fell from the naked trees. A wind began to blow chill from the misty mountains to the east. The hunter's moon waxed round in the night sky, the dyslexia tonight, man, and put to flight all the lesser stars. But low in the south one star shone red. Every night, as the moon waned, it shone brighter and brighter. Frodo could see it from his window, deep in the heavens, burning like a watchful eye that glared above the trees on the brink of the valley. Ooh. The hobbits had been nearly 2 months in the house of Elrond, and November had gone by with the last shreds of autumn, and December was passing, when the scouts began to return. Some had gone north beyond the springs of the Horwell into the Etten Moors, and the others had gone west, and with the help of Aragorn and the rangers had searched the lands far down the Grey Flood, as far as Tharbad, where the north road crossed the river by a ruined town. Many had gone east and south, and some of these had crossed the mountains and entered Mirkwood, while others had climbed the pass at the source of the Gladden River and had come down into the Wilderland, over the Gladden fields, and so at length had reached the old home of Radagast at Roscobel. Radagast was not there, and they had returned over the high pass that was called the Dimrill Stair. Hey, Dimrill, I think we mentioned that a little bit in Sars Moria game today. The sons of Elrond, Elladan and Elrohir, were the last to return. They had made a great journey, passing down the Silver Lode into a strange country, but their errand they would not speak to any save Elrond. In no region had the messengers discovered any signs or tidings of the riders or any servants of the enemy. Even from the eagles of the misty mountains they had learned no fresh news. Nothing had been seen or heard of Gollum, but the wild wolves were still gathering, and were hunting again far up the great river. 3 of the black horses had been found at once, drowned in a flooded ford. Over the rocks of the rapids below it, searchers discovered the bodies of 5 more, and also a long black cloak, slashed and tattered. Of the black riders no other trace was to be seen, and nowhere was their presence to be felt. It seemed that they had vanished from the north. 8 out of the 9 are accounted for at least, said Gandalf. It is rash to be too sure, yet I think that we may hope now that the ring-wraiths were scattered, and have been obliged to return as best they could to their master of Mordor, empty and shapeless. If that is so, it will be some time before they can begin the hunt again. Of course, the enemy has other servants, but they will have to journey all the way to the borders of Rivendell before they can pick up our trail. And if they are careful, that will be hard to find. But we must delay no longer. Elrond summoned the hobbits to him. He looked gravely at Frodo. The time has come, he said. If the ring is to set out, it must go soon. But those who go with it must not count on their errand being aided by war or force. They must pass into the domain of the enemy, far from aid. Do you still hold to your word, Frodo, that you will be the ring-bearer? I do, said Frodo. I will go with Sam. Then I cannot help you much, even with counsel, said Elrond. I can foresee very little of your road, and how your task is to be achieved I do not know. The shadow has crept now to the feet of the mountains, and draws nigh even to the borders of the grey flood, and under the shadow all is dark to me. You will meet many foes, some open and some disguised, and you may find friends upon your way when you least look for it. I will send out messages, such as I can contrive, to those whom I know in the wide world, but so perilous are the lands now become that some may well miscarry, or come no quicker than you yourself. And I will choose you companions to go with you, as far as they will or fortune allows. The number must be few, since your hope is in speed and secrecy. Had I a host of elves in armor of the olden days, it would avail little, save to arouse the power of Mordor. The company of the ring shall be 9, and the 9 walkers shall be set against the 9 riders that are evil. With you and your faithful servant, Gandalf, will go, for this shall be his great task, and may be the end of his labors. For the rest they shall represent the other free peoples of the world, elves, dwarves, and men. Legolas shall be for the elves, and Gimli, son of Glóin, for the dwarves. They are willing to go at least to the passes of the mountains, and maybe beyond. For men you shall have Aragorn, son of Arathorn, for the ring of Isildur concerns him closely. Strider, cried Frodo. Yes, he said with a smile. I ask leave once again to be your companion, Frodo. I would have begged you to come, said Frodo, only I thought you were going to Minas Tirith with Boromir. I am, said Aragorn, and the sword that was broken shall be reforged ere I set out to war. But your road and our road lie together for many hundreds of miles. Therefore Boromir will also be in the company. He is a valiant man. And there remain 2 more to be found, said Elrond. These I will consider. Of my household I may find some that it seems good to me to send. But that will leave no place for us, cried Pippin in dismay. We don't want to be left behind. We want to go with Frodo. That is because you do not understand and cannot imagine what lies ahead, said Elrond. Neither does Frodo, said Gandalf, unexpectedly supporting Pippin. Nor do any of us see clearly. It is true that if these hobbits understood the danger, they would not dare to go. But they would still wish to go, or wish that they dared, and be shamed and unhappy. I think, Elrond, that in this matter it would be well to trust rather to their friendship than to great wisdom. Even if you choose for us an elf lord such as Glorfindel, he could not storm the Dark Tower, nor open the road to the fire by the power that is in him. You speak gravely, said Elrond. But I am in doubt. The Shire, I forbade, is not free now from peril, and these 2 I had thought to send back there as messengers, to do what they could, according to the fashion of their country, to warn the people of their danger. In any case, I judge that the younger of these 2, Peregrine Took, should remain. My heart is against his going. Then, Master Elrond, you shall have to lock me in prison, or send me home tied in a sack, said Pippin, for otherwise I shall follow the company. Let it be so, then. You shall go, said Elrond, and he sighed. Now the tale of the 9 is filled. In 7 days the company must depart. I want to make a joke about 7 days. Hey, True, how's it going? That was all very funny. Imagine that. Gandalf is the reason that Pippin was in the company, which ultimately was, of course, a wise decision, but still quite funny. The sword of Elendil was forged anew by elvish smiths, and on its blade was traced a device of 7 stars set between the crescent moon and the rayed sun, and about them were written many runes, for Aragorn, son of Arathorn, was going to war upon the marshes of Mordor. Very bright was that sword when it was made whole again, The light of the sun shone redly in it, and the light of the moon shone cold, and its edge was hard and keen. And Aragorn gave it a new name, and called it Anduril, Flame of the West. Might be Anduril. That's where the accent mark is. Probably Anduril, but nobody says it like that. Aragorn and Gandalf walked together, or sat speaking of their road and the perils they would meet, and they pondered the storied and figured maps and books of lore that were in the House of Elrond. Sometimes Frodo was with them, but he was content to lean on their guidance, and he spent as much time as he could with Bilbo. In those last days, the hobbits sat together in the evening in the Hall of Fire. There were among many tales that they heard told in full the lay of Beren and Luthien, and the winning of the great jewel. But in the day, while Merry and Pippin were out and about, Frodo and Sam were to be found with Bilbo in his own small room. Then Bilbo would read passages from his book, which still seemed very incomplete, or scraps of his verses, or would take notes of Frodo's adventures. On the morning of the last day, Frodo was alone with Bilbo, and the old hobbit pulled out from under his bed a wooden box. He lifted the lid and fumbled inside. "Here is your sword," he said. "But it was broken, you know. I took it to keep it safe, but I've forgotten to ask if the smiths could mend it. No time now, so I thought perhaps you would care to have this, don't you know?" He took from the box a small sword and an old shabby leathern scabbard. Yeah, there's definitely an N on the end of leathern scabbard. And he drew it, and its polished and well-tended blade glinted suddenly, cold and bright. "This is Sting," he said, and thrust it with little effort deep into a wooden beam of Elrond's house. "Take it, if you like. I shan't want it again, I expect." Frodo accepted it gratefully. "Also, there is this," said Bilbo, bringing out a parcel which seemed to be rather heavy for its size. He unwound several folds of old cloth and held up a small shirt of mail. It was close woven, of many rings, as supple almost as linen, cold as ice, and harder than steel. It shone like moonlit silver, and was studded with white gems. With it was a belt of pearl and crystal. "It is a pretty thing, isn't it?" said Bilbo, moving it in the light. "And useful. It is my dwarf mail that Thorin gave me. I got it back from Mitchell Delving before I started, and packed it with my luggage. I brought all the memories of my journey away with me, except the ring. But I did not expect to use this, and I don't need it now, except to look at sometimes. You hardly feel any weight when you put it on." I don't think I should look right in it," said Frodo. "Just what I said myself," said Bilbo. "But never mind about looks. You can wear it under your outer clothes. Come on. You must share this secret with me. Don't tell anyone else. But I should feel happier if I knew you were wearing it. I have a fancy it would turn even the knives of the Black Riders," he ended in a low voice. "Very well, I will take it," said Frodo. Bilbo put it on him, and fastened Sting upon the glittering belt, and then Frodo put over the top his old weather-stained breeches, tunic, and jacket. "Just a plain hobbit you look," said Bilbo, "but there is more about you now than appears on the surface. Good luck to you." He turned away and looked out the window, trying to hum a tune. "I cannot thank you as I should, Bilbo, for this, for all your past kindnesses," said Frodo. "Don't try," said the old hobbit, turning around and slapping him on the back. "Ow!" he cried. "You are too hard now to slap. But there you are. Hobbits must stick together, especially Bagginses. All I can ask in return is, take as much care of yourself as you can, and bring back all the news you can, and any old songs and tales you can come by. I'll do my best to finish my book before you return. I should like to write the second book, if I am spared." He broke off and turned to the window again, singing softly. "I sit beside the fire and think of all that I have seen, of meadow flowers and butterflies, and summers that have been, of yellow leaves and gossamer, and autumns that there were, with morning mist and silver sun and wind upon my hair. I sit beside the fire and think of how the world will be when winter comes without a spring, that I shall ever see. For still there are so many things that I have never seen. In every wood, in every spring, there is a different green. I sit beside the fire and think of people long ago, and people who will see a world that I shall never know. But all the while I sit and think of times that were before. I listen for returning feet and voices at the door. It was a cold, gray day near the end of December. The east wind was streaming through the bare branches of the trees and seething in the dark pines on the hills. Ragged clouds were hurrying overhead, dark and low. As the cheerless shadows of the early evening began to fall, the company made ready to set out. They were to start at dusk, for Elrond counseled them to journey under cover of night, as often as they could, until they were far from Rivendell. You should fear many of the eyes of the servants of Sauron, he said. I do not doubt that news of the discomfiture of the riders has already reached him, and he will be filled with wrath. Soon now his spies on foot and wing sorry, thinking about rings, on foot and wing will be abroad in the northern lands. Even of the sky above you must beware as you go on your way. The company took little gear for war, for their hope was in secrecy, not in battle. It was my kind of mission. Aragorn had Anduril, but no other weapon. He should definitely take a bow and probably also an axe. We all know what happens when your rangers don't have axes. Anyway. And he went forth, clad only in rusty green and brown, as a ranger of the wilderness. Boromir had a long sword, in fashion like Anduril, but of less lineage, and he bore also a shield and his war horn. Smart man. Loud and clear it sounds in the valleys of the hills, he said, and then let all the foes of Gondor flee. Putting it to his lips, he blew a blast, and the echoes leapt from rock to rock, and all that heard that voice in Rivendell sprang to their feet. Asshole. Slow should you be to wind that horn again, Boromir, said Elrond, until you stand once more on the borders of your land, and dire need is on you. Maybe, said Boromir, but always I have let my horn cry at setting forth, and though thereafter we may walk in the shadows, I will not go forth as a thief in the night. I'm sorry, it was just a really funny mental image of Boromir blurting his horn and Elrond, very probably quite stern at this moment, Elrond jumping, getting annoyed. Gimli the dwarf alone wore openly a shirt of steel rings, for dwarves make light of burdens. And in his belt was a broad-bladed axe. At least somebody's got one. Legolas had a bow and a quiver, and at his belt a long white knife. The younger hobbits wore the swords that they had taken from the barrow, but Frodo took only Sting, and his mailcoat, as Bilbo wished, remained hidden. Gandalf bore his staff, but girded his side was the elven sword Glamdring, the mate of Orcrist, that now lay upon the breast of Thorin under the lonely mountain. All were well furnished by Elrond in thick, warm clothes, and they had jackets and cloaks lined with fur. Spare food and clothes and blankets and other needs were laden on a pony, none other than the poor beast that they had brought from Bree. The stay in Rivendell had worked a great wonder of change on him. He was glossy and seemed to have the vigor of youth. It was Sam who had insisted on choosing him, declaring that Bill, as he called him, would pine if he did not come. That animal can nearly talk, he said, and would talk if he stayed here much longer. He gave me a look as plain as Mr. Pippin could speak it. If you don't let me go with you, Sam, I'll follow you on my own. So Bill was going as the beast of burden, yet he was the only member of the company that did not seem depressed. Oh. Their farewells had been said in the great hall by the fire, and they were only waiting now for Gandalf, who had not yet come out of the house. A gleam of firelight came from the open doors, and soft lights were glowing in many windows. Bilbo, hurried in a cloak, stood silent on the doorstep beside Frodo. Aragorn sat with his head bowed to his knee. Only Elrond knew fully what this hour meant to him. The others could be seen as gray shapes in the darkness. Sam was standing by the pony, sucking his teeth and staring moodily into the gloom where the river roared stonily below. His desire for adventure was at its lowest ebb. "Bill, my lad," he said, "you oughtn't to have took up with us. You could have stayed here and ate the best hay till the new grass comes." Bill swished his tail and said nothing. Sam eased the pack off his shoulders and went over anxiously in his mind all the things that he had stowed in it, wondering if he had forgotten anything. His chief treasure, his cooking gear, and the little box of salt that he always carried and refilled when he could. A good supply of pipeweed, but not near enough, I'll warrant. I? Who's I? The narrator is I? Oh my goodness. Mind blown. Flint and tinder, woolen hose, linen, various small belongings of his master's that Frodo had forgotten, and Sam had stowed to bring them out in triumph when they were called for. He went through them all. "Rope," he muttered. "No rope, and only last night you said to yourself, 'Sam, what about a bit of rope? You'll want it if you haven't got it.' Well, I'll want it. I can't get it now. Somebody better have a proper woodcutting axe, all I'm saying. But yeah, also rope. You're always going to want some rope." At that moment, Elrond came out with Gandalf, and he called the company to him. "This is my last word," he said in a low voice. "The ring-bearer is setting out on the quest of Mount Doom. On him alone is any change laid, neither to cast away the ring, nor to deliver it to any servant of the enemy, nor indeed to let any handle it, save members of the company and the council, and only then in gravest need. The others go with him as free companions to help him on his way. You may tarry or come back, or turn aside into other paths as chance allows. The further you go, the less easy it will be for you to withdraw, yet no oath or bond is laid on you to go further than you will. For you do not yet know the strength of your hearts, and you cannot foresee what each may meet upon the road. Faithless is he that says farewell when the road darkens," says Gimli. "Maybe," said Elrond, "but let him not vow to walk in the dark who has not seen the nightfall." "Yet sworn word may strengthen quaking heart," said Gimli. "Or break it," said Elrond. "Look not too far ahead, but go now with good hearts. Farewell, and may the blessing of elves and men and all free folk go with you. May the stars shine upon your faces." Good luck," cried Bilbo, stuttering with the cold. "I don't suppose you will be able to keep a diary, Frodo, my lad, but I shall expect a full account when you get back, and don't be too long. Farewell." Many others of Elrond's household stood in the shadows and watched them go, bidding them farewell with soft voices. There was no laughter, and no song or music. At last they turned away and faded silently into the dusk. They crossed the bridge and wound slowly up the long, steep paths that led out of the cloven vale of Rivendell, and they came at length to the high moor where the wind hissed through the heather. Then with one glance at the last homely house twinkling below them, they strode away far into the night. Yeah, it was only 2 short little paragraphs in that, but I needed water anyway. At the ford of Bruinen they left the road, and turning southwards, went on by narrow paths among the folded lands. Their purpose was to hold this course west of the mountains for many miles and days. The country was much rougher and more barren than in the green vale of the great river in the Wilderland, on the other side of the range, and their going would be slow, but they hoped in this way to escape the notice of unfriendly eyes. The spies of Sauron had hitherto seldom been seen in this empty country, and the paths were little known except to the people of Rivendell. Gandalf walked in front, and with him went Aragorn, who knew this land even in the dark. The others were in file behind, and Legolas, whose eyes were keen, was the rear guard. The first part of their journey was hard and dreary, and Frodo remembered little of it, save the wind. For many sunless days an icy blast came from the mountains in the east, and no garment seemed able to keep out its searching fingers. Though the company was well clad, they seldom seemed warm, either moving or at rest. They slept uneasily during the middle of the day, in some hollow of the land, or hidden under the tangled thorn bushes that grew in thickets in many places. In the late afternoon they were roused by the watch, and took their chief meal, a cold and cheerless as a rule, for they could seldom risk lighting of a fire. In the evening they went on again, always as nearly southward as they could find a way. At first it seemed to the hobbits that although they walked and stumbled until they were weary, they were creeping forward like snails and getting nowhere. Each day the land looked much the same as it had the day before. Yet steadily the mountains were drawing nearer. South of Rivendell they rose even higher, and bent westwards, and about the feet of the main range there was tumbled an ever wider land of bleak hills and deep valleys filled with turbulent waters. Paths were few and winding, and led them often only to the edge of some sheer fall or down into treacherous swamps. They had been a fortnight on the way when the weather changed. The wind suddenly fell, then veered round to the south. The swift-flowing clouds lifted and melted away, and the sun came out, pale and bright. There came a cold, clear dawn at the end of a long, stumbling night march. The travelers reached a low ridge crowned with ancient holly trees, whose gray-green trunks seemed to have been built out of the very stone of the hills. Their dark leaves shone, and their berries glowed red in the light of the rising sun. Away in the south, Frodo could see the dim shapes of lofty mountains that seemed now to stand across the path that the company was taking. At the left of this high range rose 3 peaks. The tallest and nearest stood up like a tooth tipped with snow. I think that might actually be its name. Very, very clever, Professor. Oh, so clever I lost my place. Where'd it go? Tooth tip of snow. Its great bare northern precipice was still largely in the shadow, but where the sunlight slanted upon it, it glowed red. That is definitely its name. Gandalf stood at Frodo's side and looked out under his hand. "We have done well," he said. "We have reached the borders of the country that men call Hollin. Many elves lived here in happier days, when Eregion was its name." We're going to go with Eregion. 45 leagues, as the crow flies, we have come, though many long miles further our feet have walked. The land and the weather will be milder now, but perhaps all the more dangerous. "Dangerous or not, a real sunrise is mighty welcome," said Frodo, throwing back his hood and letting the morning light fall on his face. "But the mountains are ahead of us," said Pippin. "We must have turned eastwards in the night." "No," said Gandalf, "but you see further ahead in the clear light. Beyond those peaks, the range bends round southwest. There are many maps in Elrond's house, but I suppose you never thought to look at them." "Yes, I did, sometimes," said Pippin, "but I don't remember them. Frodo has a better head for that sort of thing." "I need no map," said Gimli, who had come up with Legolas, and was gazing out before him with a strange light in his deep eyes. "This is the land where our fathers worked of old. We have wrought the image of those mountains into many works of metal and of stone, and into many songs and tales. They stand tall in our dreams. Baraz, Zirak, Shathur. Only once have I seen them from afar in waking life, but I know them and their names, for under them lies Khazad-dûm, the Dwarodelf. That is now called the Black Pit, Moria, in the Elvish tongue. Yonder stands Barazinbar, the Red Horn, cruel Karathas. Karathras. There's a lot of R's in this word. It's Caradhras. And beyond him are Silvertine and Cloudyhead, Celebdil the White, and Fenwithil the Grey, that we call Zirak-Zigil and Bundushathur. Bundushathur. There the misty mountains divide, and between their arms lies the deep-shadowed valley. How do you spell that? Which one? There the misty mountains divide, and between their arms, also, welcome, Michael. Enjoy the listening. And between their arms lies the deep-shadowed valley, which we cannot forget. Azanul Bazaar, the Dimril Dale, which the elves call Nanduhirian. The Urs, Caradhras, Caradhras. It is for the Dimril Dale that we are making, said Gandalf. If we climb the pass that is called the Redhorn Gate, under the far side of Caradhras, we shall come down by the Dimril Stair into the deep vale of the dwarves. There lies the Miromir, and there the river Silverlode rises in its icy springs. Dark is the water of Keledzarum, said Gimli. If I were really going to be pronouncing this correctly, it would be Keledzarum, but that's a lot to think about. And cold are the springs of Kibil Nala. My heart trembles at the thought that I may see them soon. May you have joy at the sight, my good dwarf, said Gandalf. But whatever you may do, we at least cannot stay in that valley. We must go down the Silverlode into the secret woods, and so to the great river, and then, he paused. Yes, and where then? Asked Merry. To the end of the journey, in the end, said Gandalf. We cannot look too far ahead. Let us be glad that the first stage is safely over. I think we will rest here, not only today, but tonight as well. There is a wholesome air about Hollin. Much evil must befall a country before it wholly forgets the elves, if once they dwelt there. That is true, said Legolas. But the elves of this land were of a race strange to us of the Sylvan folk, and the trees and the grass do not now remember them. Only I hear the stones lament them. Deep they delved us, fair they wrought us, high they builded us. Builded is actually the word used here. Builded us. But they are gone. They are gone. They sought the havens long ago. That morning they lit a fire in a deep hollow shrouded by great bushels of holly, and their supper breakfast was merrier than it had been since they set out. They did not hurry to bed afterwards, for they expected to have all the night to sleep in, and they did not mean to go on again until the evening of the next day. Only Aragorn was silent and restless. After a while he left the company and wandered on to the ridge, where he stood in the shadow of a tree, looking out southwards and westwards, with his head posed as if he was listening. Then he returned to the brink of the dell, and looked down at the others laughing and talking. "What's the matter, Strider?" Merry called up. "What are you looking for? Do you miss the east wind?" "No, indeed," he answered. "But I miss something. I have been down in the country of Hollin, and I have been in the country of Hollin in many seasons. No folk dwell here now, but many other creatures live here at all times, especially birds. Yet now all things but you are silent. I can feel it. There's no sound for miles about us, and your voices seem to make the ground echo. I do not understand it." Gandalf looked up with sudden interest. "But what do you guess is the reason?" he asked. "Is there more in it than surprise at seeing 4 hobbits, not to mention the rest of us, where people are so seldom seen or heard?" "I hope that is it," answered Aragorn. "But I have a sense of watchfulness and of fear that I have never had here before. A little bit. And we must be more careful, said Gandalf. If you bring a ranger with you, it is well to pay attention to him, especially if the ranger is Aragorn. We must stop talking aloud, rest quickly, and set the watch. By the way, my D&D party has 2 rangers in it. And I like to play rangers as well, which is why I make all the ranger jokes and the axe jokes, because it's been a thing. I'll have to tell them about this. It was Sam's turn that day to take the first watch, but Aragorn joined him. The others fell asleep. Then the silence grew until even Sam felt it. The breathing of the sleepers could be plainly heard. The swish of the pony's tail and the occasional movements of his feet became loud noises. Sam could hear his own joints creaking if he stirred. Dead silence was around him, and over all hung a clear blue sky as the sun rode up from the east. Away in the south, a dark patch appeared and grew, and drove north like flying smoke in the wind. "What's that, Strider? Don't look like a cloud," said Sam in a whisper to Aragorn. He made no answer. He was gazing intently at the sky, but before long Sam could see for himself what was approaching. Flocks of birds, flying at great speed, were wheeling and circling and traversing all the land as if they were searching for something, and they were steadily drawing nearer. "Lie flat and still," hissed Aragorn, pulling Sam down into the shade of a holly bush. For a whole regiment of birds had broken away suddenly from the main host and came flying low, straight towards the ridge. Sam thought they were a kind of crow of a large size. As they passed overhead, in so dense a throng that their shadow followed them darkly over the ground below, one harsh croak was heard. Not until they had dwindled into the distance, north and west, and the sky was again clear, would Aragorn rise. Then he sprang up and went and waked Gandalf. "Regiments of black crows are flying all over the land between the mountains and the Grey Flood," he said, "and they have passed over Holland. They are not natives here. They are Crebain, out of Fangorn and Dunland, and I do not know what they are about. Possibly there is some trouble away south from which they are fleeing, but I think they are spying out the land. I've also glimpsed many hawks flying high up in the sky. I think we ought to move again this evening. Holland is no longer wholesome for us. It is being watched." "And in that case, so is the Red-Horn Gate," said Gandalf. "And how we can get over that without being seen, I cannot imagine. But we will think of that when we must. As we're moving as soon as it is dark, I'm afraid that you're right." "Luckily our fire made little smoke, and had burned low before the Crebain came," said Aragorn. "It must be put out and not lit again." Whew. "Well, if that isn't a plague and a nuisance," said Pippin. The news, no fire, and to move again by night, had been broken to him. As soon as he woke in the late afternoon, all because of a pack of crows, "I look forward to a real good meal tonight, something hot." "Well, you can go on looking forward," said Gandalf. "There may be many unexpected feasts ahead for you. For myself, I should like a pipe to smoke in comfort, and warmer feet. However, we are certain of one thing at any rate. It will get warmer as we get south. Too warm, I shouldn't wonder." Shouldn't wonder? Wow, we're flipping the W's and the M's tonight, folks. That's, yep, muttered Sam to Frodo. "But I'm beginning to think it's time we got a sight of that fiery mountain. and saw the end of the road, so to speak. And I thought at first that this that this here Redhorn, or whatever its name is, might be it, till Gimli spoke his piece. A fair jaw-cracker dwarf language must be. Ah, what a beautiful line. Maps conveying nothing to Sam's mind, and all distances in these strange lands seemed so vast that he was quite out of his reckoning. All that day the company remained in hiding. The dark birds passed over now and again, but as the westering sun grew red, they disappeared southwards. At dusk the company set out, and turning now half east, they steered their course toward Caradhras. Caradhras. I don't know. Caradhras. I like Caradhras, but that's probably because I speak English. Far away, still glowed faintly red in the last light of the vanished sun. One by one, white stars sprang forth as the sky faded. Guided by Aragorn, they struck a good path, and it looked to Frodo like the remains of an ancient road that had once been broad and well planned from Holland to the mountain pass. The moon, now at the full, rose over the mountains, and cast a pale light in which the shadows of stones were black. Many of them looked to have been worked by hand, though now they lay tumbled and ruinous in a bleak, barren land. It was the cold, chill hour before the first stir of dawn, and the moon was low. Frodo looked up at the sky. Suddenly he saw or felt a shadow pass over the high stars, as if for a moment they faded, then flashed out again. He shivered. "Did you see anything pass over?" he whispered to Gandalf, who was just ahead. "No, but I felt it, whatever it was," he answered. "It may be nothing, only a wisp of thin cloud." "It was moving fast, then," muttered Aragorn, "and not with the wind." I'm out of water. How much longer do I have before I get... several pages. I'm going to take a quick 30-second water break. Be right back. "And not with the wind," he said. How ominous. Nothing further happened that night. The next morning dawned even brighter than before, but the air was chill again. Already the wind was turning back towards the east. For 2 more nights they marched on, climbing steadily, but ever more slowly as their road wound up into the hills, and the mountains towered up nearer and nearer. On the 3rd morning, Caradhras rose before them, a mighty peak, tipped with snow like silver, but with sheer naked sides, dull red as if stained with blood. There was a black look in the sky, and the sun was wane. The wind had gone now, round to the northeast. Gandalf snuffed the air and looked back. "Winter deepens behind us," he said quietly to Aragorn. "The heights away north are whiter than they were. Snow is lying far down their shoulders. Tonight we shall be on our way up, high up, towards the Redhorn Gate. We may well be seen by watchers on that narrow path, and waylaid by some evil, but the weather may prove a more deadly enemy than any. What do you think of your course now, Aragorn?" Frodo overheard these words, and understood that Gandalf and Aragorn were continuing some debate that had begun long before. He listened anxiously. "I think no good of our course from beginning to end, as you know well, Gandalf," answered Aragorn. "And perils known and unknown will grow as we go on. But we must go on, and it is no good delaying the passage of the mountains. Further south there are no good passes till one comes to the gap of Rohan. I do not trust that way, since your news of Sauron. Who knows which side now the marshals of the Horse Lords serve?" "Who knows indeed," said Gandalf. "But there is another way, and not by the pass of Caradhras, the dark and secret way that we have spoken of. But let us not speak of it again, not yet. Say nothing to the others, I beg, not until it is plain that there is no other way." "We must decide before we go further," answered Gandalf. "Then let us weigh the matter in our minds while the others rest and sleep," said Aragorn. Caracho! Good evening. In the late afternoon, while the others were finishing their breakfast, Gandalf and Aragorn went aside together and stood looking at Caradhras. Its sides were now dark and sullen, and its head was in grey cloud. Frodo watched them, wondering which way the debate would go. When they returned to the company, Gandalf spoke, and then he knew that it had been decided to face the weather in the high pass. He was relieved. He could not guess what the other dark and secret way, but the very mention of it had seemed to fill Aragorn with dismay, and Frodo was glad that it had been abandoned. There's not a big pause here. I'm just From signs that we have seen lately, said Gandalf, I fear that the Redhorn Gate may be watched, and I also have doubts of the weather that is coming up behind. Snow may come, and we must go with all the speed that we can. Even so, it will take us more than 2 marches before we reach the top of the pass. Dark will come early this evening. We must leave as soon as you can get ready. I will add a word of advice, if I may, said Boromir. I was born under the shadow of the White Mountains, and know something of journeys in the high places. We shall meet bitter cold, if no worse, before we come down on the other side. It will not help us to keep so secret that we are frozen to death. When we leave here, where there are still a few trees and bushes, each of us should carry a faggot of wood as large as he can bear. And Bill could take a bit more, couldn't you, lad? Said Sam. The pony looked at him mournfully. Very well, said Gandalf. But we must not use the wood, not unless it is a choice between fire and death. Ew. He's quite good at ending paragraphs dramatically. The company set out again, with good speed at first, but soon their way became steep and difficult. The twisting and climbing road had in many places almost disappeared, and was blocked with many fallen stones. The night grew deadly dark under the great clouds. A bitter wind swirled among the rocks. By midnight they had climbed to the knees of the great mountains. Their narrow path now wound under a sheer wall of cliffs to the left, above which the grim flanks of Caradhras towered up invisible in the gloom. On the right was a gulf of darkness where the land fell suddenly into a deep ravine. Laboriously they climbed a sharp slope and halted for a moment at the top. Frodo felt a soft touch on his face. He put out his arm and saw the dim white flakes of snow settling on his sleeve. They went on. But before long the snow was falling fast, filling all the air, and swirling into Frodo's eyes. The dark bent shapes of Gandalf and Aragorn, only a pace or 2 ahead, could hardly be seen. I don't like this at all, panted Sam, just behind. Snow's all right on a fine morning, but I like to be in bed while it's falling. I wish this lot would go off to Hobbiton. Folk might welcome it there. Except on the high moors of the North Farthing, a heavy fall was rare in the Shire, and was regarded as a pleasant event and a chance for fun. No living hobbit, save Bilbo, could remember the fell winter of 1311, when white wolves invaded the Shire over the frozen Brandywine. Gandalf halted. Snow was thick on his hood and shoulders, and it was already ankle-deep about his boots. This is what I feared, he said. What do you say now, Aragorn? That I feared it too, Aragorn answered, but less than other things. I knew the risk of snow, though it seldom falls heavily so far south, save high up in the mountains. But we are not high yet. We are still far down, where the paths are usually open all winter. I wonder if this is a contrivance of the enemy, said Boromir. They say in my land that he can govern the storms in the mountains of shadow, and stand upon the borders of Mordor. He has strange powers and many allies. His arm has grown long indeed, said Gimli, if he can draw snow down from the north to trouble us here 300 leagues away. His arm has grown long, said Gandalf. Like I said, just ending these paragraphs banger after banger. While they were halted, the wind died down, and the snow slackened until it almost ceased. They trampled on again, but they had not gone more than a furlong when the storm returned with a fresh fury. The wind whistled, and the snow became a blinding blizzard. Soon even Boromir found it hard to keep going. The hobbits, bent nearly double, toiled along behind the taller folk, but it was plain that they could not go much further if the snow continued. Frodo's feet felt like lead, and Pippin was dragging behind. Even Gimli, as stout as any dwarf could be, was grumbling as he trudged. The company halted suddenly, as if they had come to an agreement without any words being spoken. They heard eerie noises in the darkness round them. It may have been only a trick of the wind in the cracks and gullies of the rocky wall, but the sounds were those of shrill cries and wild howls of laughter. Stones began to fall from the mountainside, whistling over their heads or crashing on the path beside them. Every now and again they heard a dull rumble, as a great boulder rolled down from hidden heights above. "We cannot go further tonight," said Boromir. Let those call it the wind who will. There are fell voices on the air. Let those call it the wind who will." I am not able to do that sentence right now. There are fell voices on the air, and these stones are aimed at us. I do call it the wind. Oh, I do call it the wind, said Aragorn. But that does not make what you say untrue. There are many evil and unfriendly things in the world that have little love for those that go on two legs, and yet are not in league with Sauron, but have purposes of their own. Some have been in this world longer than he. Caradhras was called the Cruel, and had an ill name, said Gimli. Long years ago, when rumor of Sauron had not been heard in these lands. It matters little who is the enemy, if we cannot beat off his attack, said Gandalf. But what can we do? Cried Pippin miserably. He was leaning on Merry and Frodo, and he was shivering. Either stop where we are, or go back, said Gandalf. It is no good going on. Only a little higher, if I remember rightly. This path leaves the cliff and runs into a wide, shallow trough at the bottom of a long, hard slope. We should have no shelter there from snow or stones or anything else. It is no good going back while the storm holds, said Aragorn. We have passed no place on the way up that offered more shelter than this cliff wall we are under now. Shelter, muttered Sam. If this is shelter, then one wall and no roof make a house. At some point we're going to come upon one of my favorite cheeky scenes. I'll let you know when we get there, of course. The company now gathered together as close to the cliff as they could. It faced southwards, and near the bottom it leaned out a little, so that they hoped it would give them some protection from the northerly wind and from the falling stones. But eddying blasts swirled around them from every side, and the snow flowed down in even denser clouds. They huddled together with their backs to the wall. Bill the pony stood patiently but dejectedly in front of the hobbits and screened them a little, but before long the drifting snow was above his hocks, and it went on mounting. If they had had no larger companions, the hobbits would soon have been entirely buried. A great sleepiness came over Frodo. He felt himself sinking fast into a warm and hazy dream. He thought a fire was heating his toes. And out of the shadows on the other side of the hearth, he heard Bilbo's voice speaking. I don't think much of your diary, he said. Snowstorms on January the 12th. There was no need to come back to report that. But I wanted rest and sleep, Bilbo, Frodo answered with an effort, when he felt himself shaken, and he came back painfully to wakefulness. Boromir had lifted him off the ground, out of a nest of snow. This will be the death of the halflings, Gandalf, said Boromir. It is useless to sit here until the snow goes over our heads. We must do something to save ourselves. Give them this, said Gandalf, searching in his pack and drawing out another leathern flask. Just a mouthful each, for all of us. It is very precious. It is Mirivor, the cordial of Imladris. Elrond gave it to me at our parting. Pass it round. As soon as Frodo had swallowed a little of the warm and fragrant liquor, He felt a new strength of heart, and the heavy drowsiness left his limbs. The others also revived, and found fresh hope and vigor, but the snow did not relent. It whirled about them thicker than ever, and the wind blew louder. "What do you say to fire?" asked Boromir suddenly. "The choice seems near now between fire and death, Gandalf. Doubtless we shall be hidden from all unfriendly eyes when the snow has covered us, but that will not help us." "You may make a fire if you can," answered Gandalf. "If there are any watchers that can endure this storm, then they can see us, fire or no." But though they had brought wood and kindling, by the advice of Boromir, it passed the skill of elf or even dwarf to strike a flame that would hold amid the swirling wind, or catch in the wet fuel. At last, reluctantly, Gandalf himself took a hand. They just really love to use the word, don't they? Picking up a faggot, he held it aloft for a moment, and then with a word of command, Nor on Edraith Amen. Elvish magic. He thrust the end of his staff into the midst of it. At once, a great spout of green and blue flame sprang out, and the wood flared and sputtered. "If there are any to see, then I at least am revealed to them," he said. "I have written Gandalf is here, in signs that all can read from Rivendell to the mouths of Anduin." But the company cared no longer for watchers or unfriendly eyes. Their hearts were rejoiced to see the light of the fire. The wood burned merrily, and though all round it the snow hissed and pools of slush crept under their feet, they warmed their hands gladly at the blaze. There they stood, stooping in a circle around the little dancing and blowing flames. A red light was on their tired and anxious faces. Behind them, the night was like a black wall. But the wood was burning fast, and the snow still fell. Well, it might be coming up. Soon. Are we going to get to Moria tonight? Yes, soon, actually. Yep. Not the bridge, but we'll get to Moria tonight. The fire burned low, and the last log was thrown on. "The night is getting old," said Aragorn. "The dawn is not far off." "If any dawn can pierce these clouds," said Gimli. Boromir stepped out of the circle and stared up into the blackness. "The snow is growing less," he said, "and the wind is quieter." Frodo gazed wearily at the flakes still falling out of the dark to be revealed white for a moment in the light of the dying fire. But for a long time he could see no sign of their slackening. Then suddenly, as sleep was beginning to creep over him again, he was aware that the wind had indeed fallen, and the flakes were becoming larger and fewer. Very slowly a dim light began to glow. At last the snow stopped together. Oh. As the light grew stronger, it showed a silent, shrouded world. Below their refuge were white humps and domes, and shapeless deeps beneath which the path that they had trodden was altogether lost. But the heights above were hidden in great clouds, still heavy with the threat of snow. Gimli looked up and shook his head. "Caradhras has not forgiven us," he said. "He has more snow yet to fling at us if we go on. The sooner we go back and down, the better." To this all agreed, but the retreat was now difficult. It might well prove impossible. Only a few paces from the ashes of the fire, the snow lay many feet deep, higher than the heads of the hobbits. In places it had been scooped and piled by the wind into great drifts against the cliff. "If Gandalf would go down before us with a bright flame, he might melt a path for you," said Legolas. The storm had troubled him little, and he alone of the company remained still light of heart. "If elves could fly over mountains, they might fetch the sun to save us," answered Gandalf. "But I must have something to work on. I cannot burn snow." "Well," said Boromir, "when heads are at a loss, bodies must serve, as we say in my country. The strongest of us must seek a way. See, though all is now snow-clad, our path, as we came up, turned about that shoulder of rock down yonder. It was there that the snow first began to burden us. If we could reach that point, maybe it would prove easier beyond. It is no more than a furlong off, I guess. Then let us force a path thither, you and I, said Aragorn. Aragorn was the tallest of the company, but Boromir, little less in height, was broader and heavier in build. He led the way, and Aragorn followed him. Slowly they moved off, and were soon toiling heavily. In places the snow was breast-high, and often Boromir seemed to be swimming or burrowing with his great arms rather than walking. Legolas watched them for a while with a smile upon his lips, and then he turned to the others. The strongest must seek a way, say you. But I say, let a plowman plow, but choose an otter for swimming, and for running light over grass and leaf, and over snow, an elf. With that, he sprang forth nimbly, and then Frodo noticed, as if for the first time, though he had long known it, that the elf had no boots, but wore only light shoes, as he always did, and his feet made little imprint in the snow. Farewell, he said to Gandalf. I go to find the sun. Then, swift as a runner over firm sand, he shot away, and quickly overtaking the toiling men, with a wave of his hand he passed them, and sped into the distance, and vanished round the rocky turn. Little bastard. I have no idea. No idea. Ugh. But I do love cheeky bastard Legolas. The others waited, huddled together, watching until Boromir and Aragorn dwindled into black specks in the whiteness. At length they too passed from sight. The time dragged on. The clouds lowered, and now a few flakes of snow came hurling down again. An hour, maybe, went by, though it seemed far longer. Then at last they saw Legolas coming back. At the same time Boromir and Aragorn reappeared round the bend, far behind him, and came labouring up the slope. Well, cried Legolas as he ran up, I have not brought the sun. She is walking in the blue fields of the south, and a little wreath of snow on this red-horn hillock troubles her not at all. But I have brought back a gleam of good hope for those who are doomed to go on foot. There is the greatest wind drift of all just beyond the turn, and there our strong men were almost buried. They despaired until I returned and told them that drift was a little wider than a wall. And on the other side, the snow suddenly grows less, while further down it is no more than a white coverlet to cool a hobbit's toes. Ah, it is as I said, growled Gimli. It was no ordinary storm. It is the ill will of Caradhras. He does not love elves and dwarves, and that drift was laid to cut off our escape. But happily your Caradhras has forgotten that you have men with you, said Boromir, who came up at that moment. And Doty men, too? What's Doty? D-O-U-G-H-T-Y. Doe as in doe. Doty. Men, too. If I may say it, though lesser men with spades might have served you better. Still we have thrust a lane through the drift, and for that all here may be grateful who cannot run as light as elves. But how are we to get down there, even if you have cut through the drift, said Pippin, voicing the thought of all the hobbits. Have hope, said Boromir. I am weary, but I still have some strength left, and Aragorn too. We will bear the little folk. The others, no doubt, will make shift to tread the path behind us. Come, Master Peregrine, I will begin with you. He lifted up the hobbit. Cling to my back, I shall need my arms, he said, and strode forward. Aragorn with Merry came behind. Pippin marvelled at his strength, seeing the passage that he had already forced with no other tool than his great limbs. Even now, burdened as he was widening the track for those who followed, thrusting the snow aside as he went. I do love Boromir. Boromir's a good dude. They came at length to the great drift. It was flung across the mountain path like a sheer and sudden wall, and its crest, sharp as if shaped with knives, reared up more than twice the height of Boromir, but through the middle a passage had been beaten, rising and falling like a bridge. On the far side, Merry and Pippin were set down, and there they waited with Legolas for the rest of the company to arrive. After a while, Boromir returned, carrying Sam. Behind, in the narrow but now well-trodden track, came Gandalf, leading Bill, with Gimli perched among the baggage. Last came Aragorn, carrying Frodo. They passed through the lane, but hardly had Frodo touched the ground when a deep rumble there rolled down a fall of stones and slithering snow. The spray of it half blinded the company as they crouched against the cliff, and when the air cleared again, they saw that the path was blocked behind them. "Enough, enough!" cried Gimli. "We are departing as quickly as we may." And indeed, with that last stroke, the malice of the mountain seemed to be expended, as if Caradhras was satisfied that the intruders had been beaten off and would not dare to return. The thread of snow lifted, the clouds began to break, and the light grew broader. I too occasionally yell at the weather. I understand, Gimli. As Legolas had reported, they found that the snow became steadily more shallow as they went down, so that even the hobbits could trudge along. Soon they all stood once more on the flat shelf at the head of the steep slope where they had left the first flakes of snow the night before. The morning was now far advanced. From the high place they looked back westwards over the lower lands. Far away from the tumble of country that lay at the foot of the mountains was the dell from which they had started to climb the pass. Frodo's legs ached. He was chilled to the bone and hungry, and his head was dizzy as he thought of the long and painful march downhill. Black specks swam before his eyes. He rubbed them, but the black specks remained. "What does that mean?" Ugh. In the distance below him, but still high above the lower foothills, dark dots were circling in the air. Oh, if I just read the next... Okay, the birds again, said Aragorn, pointing down. That cannot be helped now, said Gandalf. Whether they are good or evil, or have nothing to do with us at all, we must go down at once. Not even on the knees of Caradhras will we wait for another nightfall. A cold wind flowed down behind them as they turned their backs on the Redhorn Gate and stumbled wearily down the slope. Caradhras had defeated them, and also me, apparently. Hopefully the last time I have to say that name. And we come to chapter 4. Yeah, we'll be fine. Ooh. Runes that I cannot read. I probably could, but I won't. Yeah, no, my rune reading is not as good as it used to be. Chapter 4. A Journey in the Dark. It was evening. They've already been journeying in the dark. I suppose this is a different kind of dark. Anyway, it was evening, and the gray light was again waning fast when they halted for the night. They were very weary. The mountains were veiled in deepening dusk, and the wind was cold. Gandalf spared them one more mouthful each of the Mirrivor of Rivendell. When they had eaten some food, he called a council. "We cannot, of course, go on tonight," he said. "The attack on the Redhorn Gate has tired us out, and we must rest here for a while." "And then where are we to go?" asked Frodo. "We still have our journey and our errand before us," answered Gandalf. "We have no choice but to go on, or to return to Rivendell." Pippin's face brightened visibly at the mere suggestion of return to Rivendell. Merry and Sam looked up hopefully, but Aragorn and Boromir made no sign. Frodo looked troubled. "I wish I was back there," he said. "But how can I return without shame, unless there is indeed no other way, and we are already defeated?" "You are right, Frodo," said Gandalf. "To go back is to admit defeat, and to face worse defeat to come. If we go back now, then the ring must remain there. We shall not be able to set out again. Then sooner or later, Rivendell will be besieged. After a brief and bitter time, it will be destroyed. The ring-wraiths are deadly enemies, but they are only shadows yet of the power and terror they would possess if the ruling ring was on their master's hand again. Then we must go on, if there is a way, said Frodo with a sigh. Sam sank back with gloom. There is a way we may attempt, said Gandalf. I thought from the beginning, when first I considered this journey, that we should try it. But it is not a pleasant way, and I have not spoken of it to the company before. Aragorn was against it, until the pass over the mountain had at least been tried. If it is worse than the Redhorn Gate, then it must be evil indeed, said Merry. But you had better tell us about it, and let us know the worst at once. The road that I speak of leads to the mines of Moria, said Gandalf. Only Gimli lifted up his head. A smouldering fire was in his eyes. And all the others, a dread fell at the mention of that name. Even to hobbits, it was a legend of vague fear. Good night. We're probably gonna go a little past 11, just probably, but that's fine. If y'all end up falling asleep, that's good. That's half the point. Where was I? Even to the hobbits, it was a legend of vague fear. The road may lead to Moria, but how can we hope that it will lead through Moria? Said Aragorn darkly. It is a name of ill omen, said Boromir. Nor do I see the need to go there. If we cannot cross the mountains, let us journey southwards until we come to the Gap of Rohan, where men are friendly to my people, taking the road that I followed on my way hither. Or we might pass by and cross the Isen into Langstrand and Lebanon. Lebanon? That's a real place. Lebanon? Lebanon's a real place, anyway. And so come to Gondor, from the regions nigh to the sea. Things have changed since you came north, Boromir, answered Gandalf. Did you not hear what I told you of Saruman? With him I may have business of my own ere all is over, but the ring must not come near Isengard, if that can by any means be prevented. The Gap of Rohan is closed to us while we go with the bearer. As for the longer road, we cannot afford the time. We might spend a year in such a journey, and we should pass through many lands that are empty and harborless, yet they would not be safe. The watchful eyes of both Saruman and of the enemy are on them. When you came north, Boromir, you were in the enemy's eyes only one stray wanderer from the south, and a matter of small concern to him. His mind was busy with the pursuit of the ring, but you return now as a member of the ring's company, and you are in a peril as long as you remain with us. The danger will increase with every league that we go south under the naked sky. I know, right? Lebanon is definitely a place. It's like a real place. Since our open attempt on the mountain pass, our plight has become more desperate, I fear. I see now little hope if we do not soon vanish from sight for a while and cover our trail. Therefore, I advise that we should go neither over the mountains nor round them, but under them. That is, a road at any rate that the enemy will least expect us to take. We do not know what he expects, said Boromir. He may watch all roads, likely and unlikely. In that case, to enter Moria would be to walk into a trap, hardly better than knocking on the gates of the Dark Tower itself. The name of Moria is black. I think he means that literally. More literally means black in Elvish. You speak of what you do not know. He literally, that's literal. It's just a translation. You speak of what you do not know when you liken Moria to the stronghold of Sauron. Oh, okay, fair. Good night, Groucho. I alone of you have ever been in the dungeons of the Dark Lord, and only in his older and lesser dwelling in Dol Guldur. Those who pass the gates of Barad-dûr do not return. But I would not lead you into Moria if there were no hope of coming out again. If there are orcs there, it may prove ill for us, that is true. But most of the orcs of the Misty Mountains were scattered or destroyed in the Battle of Five Armies. The eagles report that the orcs are gathering again from afar, but there is a hope that Moria is still free. There is even a chance that the dwarves are there, and that in some deep hall of his father's, Balin, son of Fundin, may be found. However it may prove, one must tread the path that need chooses. I will tread the path with you, Gandalf, said Gimli. Of course he would. I will go and look in the halls of Durin, whatever may wait there, if you can find the doors that are shut. Good, Gimli, said Gandalf. You encourage me. We will seek the hidden doors together, and we will come through. In the ruins of the dwarves, a dwarf's head will be less easy to bewilder than elves or men or hobbits. Yet it will not be the first time that I have been to Moria. I sought there long for Thrain, son of Thror, after he was lost. I passed through, and I came out again alive. You too once passed the Dimrill Gate, said Aragorn quietly. But though I also came out again... I too once passed the Dimrill Gate. But though I came out again, the memory is very evil. I do not wish to enter Moria a second time. And I don't wish to enter it even once, said Pippin. Nor me, muttered Sam. Of course not, said Gandalf. Who would? But the question is, who will follow me if I lead you there? I will, said Gimli eagerly. Welcome, Dag. We're about to go to Moria. I will, said Aragorn heavily. You followed my lead almost to disaster in the snow, and have said no word of blame. I will follow your lead now, if this last warning does not move you. It is not of the ring nor of us others that I am thinking now, but of you, Gandalf. And I say to you, if you pass the doors of Moria, beware. Oh, what does Aragorn know that we know that nobody else knows? I will not go, said Boromir. Not these children, said Boromir. Not unless the vote of the whole company is against me. What do Legolas and the little folk say? The ring-bearer's voice surely should be heard. I do not wish to go to Moria, said Legolas. God, this is so funny. Why is this so funny, listening to them say this vote? It's totally, sensible. But it's so funny. The hobbits said nothing. Sam looked at Frodo. At last Frodo spoke. I do not wish to go, he said, but neither do I wish to refuse the advice of Gandalf. Good night if you don't make it, Dag. I don't expect people to. The point is we're going to be reading until... The VOD will be there in the morning. I beg that there should be no vote until we have slept on it. Gandalf will get votes easier in the light of the morning than in this cold gloom. How the wind howls. At these words all fell into silent thought. They heard the wind hissing among the rocks and trees, and there was a howling and a wailing round them in the empty spaces of the night. Suddenly Aragorn leapt to his feet. How the wind howls, he cried. It is howling with wolf voices. The wargs have come west of the mountains. And need we wait until morning, then? Said Gandalf. It is as I said, the hunt is up. Even if we live to see the dawn, who now will wish to journey south by night with the wild wolves on his trail? How far is Moria? Asked Boromir. How far is Moria? Asked Boromir. There was a door southwest of Caradhras, and I have to say it again, some 15 miles as the crow flies, maybe 20 as the wolf runs, answered Gandalf grimly. That's a good sentence, though. Then let us start as soon as it is light tomorrow, if we can, said Boromir. The wolf that one hears is worse than the orc that one fears. True, said Aragorn, loosening his sword in its sheath. But where the warg howls, there the orc prowls. I wish I had taken Elrond's advice, muttered Pippin to Sam. I am no good after all. There is not enough the breed of Bandabras the bull-roarer in me. These howls freeze my blood. I don't ever remember feeling so wretched. My heart's right down on my toes, Mr. Pippin, said Sam. But we aren't eaten yet, and there are some stout folk here with us. Whatever may be in store for old Gandalf, I'll wager it isn't in a wolf's belly. Oh my God! The foreshadowing! Spoiler alert. For their defense in the night, the company climbed to the top of a small hill under which they had been sheltering. It was crowned with a knot of old and twisted trees, about which lay a broken circle of boulder stones. boulder stones. Why? In the midst of this, they lit a fire, and there was no hope that darkness and silence would keep their trail from discovery by the hunting packs. Round the fire they sat, and those that were not on guard dozed uneasily. Poor Bill the pony trembled and sweated where he stood. The howling of the wolves was now all round them, sometimes nearer and sometimes farther off. In the dead of night many shining eyes were soon peering over the brow of the hill. Some advanced almost to the ring of stones. At a gap in the circle a great dark wolf shape could be seen halted, gazing at them. A sudden howl broke from him, as if he were a captain summoning his pack to the assault. Gandalf stood up and strode forward, holding his staff aloft. "Listen, hound of Sauron," he cried. "Gandalf is here. Fly, if you value your foul skin. I will shrivel you from tail to snout if you come within this ring." Roll for intimidation. The wolf snarled and sprang towards them with a great leap. Okay. At that moment there was a sharp twang. Legolas had loosed his bow. There was a hideous yell, and the leaping shape thudded to the ground. The elvish arrow had pierced its throat. The watching eyes were suddenly extinguished. It's just like in my D&D game. Gandalf and Aragorn strode forward, but the hill was deserted. The hunting packs had fled. All about them the darkness grew silent, and no cry came on the sighing wind. The night was old, and westward the waning moon was setting, gleaming fitfully through the breaking clouds. Suddenly Frodo started from sleep. Without warning, a storm of howls broke out fierce and wild all about the camp. A great host of wargs had gathered silently and was now attacking them from every side all at once. That was a sudden shift. "Fling fuel on the fire," cried Gandalf to the hobbits. "Draw your blades and stand back to back." In the leaping light, as fresh wood blazed up, Frodo saw many grey shapes spring over the ring of stones. More and more followed. Through the throat of one huge leader, Aragorn passed his sword with a thrust, and with a great sweep, Boromir hewed the head off another. Beside them, Gimli stood, with his stout legs apart, wielding his dwarf axe. The bow of Legolas was singing. In the wavering firelight, Gandalf seemed suddenly to grow. He rose up, a great menacing shape, like the monument of some ancient king of stone set upon a hill. Stooping like a cloud, he lifted a burning branch and strode to meet the wolves. They gave back before him. High in the air he tossed the blazing brand. It flared with a sudden white radiance like lightning, and his voice rolled like thunder. "Nor Edraith Amen, nor Dani Nargol. Garhoth, nor Don E. Garhoth," he cried. Sorry, I don't actually speak. There was a roar and a crackle, and the tree above him burst into leaf and bloom of blinding flame. The fire leapt from treetop to treetop. The whole hill was crowned with dazzling light. The swords and knives of the defenders shone and flickered. The last arrow of Legolas kindled in the air as it flew, and it plunged burning into the heart of a great wolf chieftain. All the others fled. Slowly the fire died, till nothing was left but falling ash and sparks. A bitter smoke curled above the tree stumps, and blew darkly from the hill, as the first light of dawn came dimly in the sky. Their enemies were routed, and did not return. "What did I tell you, Mr. Pippin?" said Sam, sheathing his sword. "Wolves won't get him. It was an eye-opener, and no mistake, nearly singed the hair off my head." It was actually really cool. I really enjoyed that. I don't know if it's going to be brought up at any point. Anyway, if I remember right, Gandalf is, like, literally associated with fire, and, like, more than just a wizard fireball motherfucker type of thing. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see exactly how exactly how we get into that, but Gandalf is a fiery character. Yeah. Fireball. Anyway, when the full light of the morning came, no signs of the wolves were to be found, and they looked in vain for the bodies of the dead. No trace of the fight remained but the charred trees and the arrows of Legolas lying on the hilltop. All were undamaged, save one, of which only the point was left. "It is as I feared," said Gandalf. "These were no ordinary wolves hunting for food in the wilderness. Let us eat quickly and go." That day the weather changed again, almost as if it was to the command of some power that had no longer any use for snow, since they had retreated from the pass, a power that wished now to have a clear light in which things that moved in the wild could be seen from far away. The wind had been turning through north to northwest during the night, and now it failed. The clouds vanished southwards, and the sky was opened, high and blue. As they stood upon the hillside, ready to depart, a pale sunlight gleamed over the mountain tops. "We must reach the doors before sunset," said Gandalf, "or I fear we shall not reach them at all. It is not far, but our path may be winding, for here Aragorn cannot guide us. He has seldom walked in this country, and only once have I been under the west wall of Moria, and that was long ago. There it lies," he said, pointing away southeastwards to where the mountain sides fell sheer into the shadows at their feet. In the distance could be seen dimly a line of bare cliffs, and in their midst, taller than the rest, one great grey wall. "When we left the pass, I led you southwards, and not back to our starting point, as some of you may have noticed. It is well that I did so, for now we have several miles less to cross, and haste is needed. Let us go." "I do not know which to hope," said Boromir grimly. "That Gandalf will find what he seeks, or that, coming to the cliff, we shall find the gates lost forever. All choices seem ill, and to be caught between wolves and the wall, the likeliest chance. Lead on." Gimli now walked ahead by the wizard's side, so eager was he to come to Moria. Together they led the company back towards the mountains. The only road out of Old Moria from the west had lain long in the course of a stream, the Sirinon. That word sounds so familiar, but I don't know why. Sirannon, Sirinon, that ran out from the feet of the cliffs near where the doors had stood. But either Gandalf was astray, or else the land had changed in recent years, for he did not strike the stream where he looked to find it, and only a few miles southwards from their start. The morning was passing towards noon, and still the company wandered and scrambled in a barren country of red stones. Nowhere could they see any gleam of water or hear any sounds of it. All was bleak and dry. Their hearts sank. They saw no living thing, and not a bird was in the sky. But what the night would bring, if it caught them in the lost land, none of them cared to think. Suddenly Gimli, who had pressed on ahead, called back to them. He was standing on a knoll and pointing to the right. Hurrying up, they saw below them a deep and narrow channel. It was empty and silent, and hardly a trickle of water flowed among the brown and red-stained stones of its bed. But on the near side there was a path, much broken and decayed, that wound its way among the ruined walls and paving stones of an ancient high-road. "Ah, here it is at last," said Gandalf. "This is where the stream ran, Sirinon, the gate stream, as they used to call it. But what has happened to the water I cannot guess. It used to be swift and noisy. Come, we must hurry on. We are late." Late? I thought a wizard never arrived late, only when he intended to. The company were footsore and tired, but they trudged doggedly along the rough and winding track for many miles. The sun turned from noon and began to go west. After a brief halt and a hasty meal, they went on again. Before them the mountain frowned, but their path lay in a deep trough of land, and they could see only the higher shoulders and the far eastward peaks. At length they came to a sharp bend. There the road, which had been veering southwards between the brink of the channel and a steep fall of the land to the left, turned and went due east again. Rounding the corner, they saw before them a low cliff, some 5 fathoms high, with a broken and jagged top. Over it, a trickling water dripped, through a wide cleft that seemed to have been carved out by a fall that had once been strong and full. "Indeed, things have changed," said Gandalf. "But there is no mistaking the place. There is all that remains of the stair falls. If I remember right, there was a flight of steps cut in the rock at their side, but the main road wound away left and climbed with several loops up to the level ground at the top. There used to be a shallow valley beyond the falls right up to the walls of Moria, and the Siranan flowed through it, with the road beside it. Let us go and see what things are like now." They found the stone steps without difficulty, and Gimli sprang swiftly up them, followed by Gandalf and Frodo. When they reached the top, they saw that they could go no further that way, and the reason for the drying up of the gate stream was revealed. Behind them, the sinking sun filled the cool western sky with glimmering gold. Before them stretched a dark, still lake. Neither sky nor sunset was reflected on its sullen surface. Interesting. The Siranan had been dammed and had filled all the valley. Beyond the ominous water were reared vast cliffs, their stern faces pallid in the fading light, final and impassable. No sign of gate or entrance, not a fissure or crack, could Frodo see in the frowning stone. "There are the walls of Moria," said Gandalf, pointing across the water. "And there the gate stood once upon a time, the elven door at the end of the road from Holland by which we have come. But this way is blocked. None of the company, I guess, will wish to swim this gloomy water at the end of the day. It has an unwholesome look. We must find a way round the northern edge," said Gimli. "The first thing for the company to do is climb up by the main path and see where that will lead us. Even if there were no lake, we could not get our baggage pony up this stair." "But in any case, we cannot take the poor beast into the mines," said Gandalf. "The road under the mountains is a dark road, and there are places narrow and steep which he cannot tread, even if we can." "Poor old Bill," said Frodo. "I had not thought of that. And poor Sam, I wonder what he will say." "I am sorry," said Gandalf. "Poor Bill has been a useful companion, and it goes to my heart to turn him adrift now. I would have travelled lighter and brought no animal, least of all this one that Sam is fond of, if I had had my way. I feared all along that we should be obliged to take this road." The day was drawing to its end, and the cold stars were glinting in the sky high above the sunset, when the company, with all the speed they could, climbed up the slopes and reached the sides of the lake. In breadth it looked to be no more than 2 or 3 furlongs at the widest point. How far it stretched away southward they could not see in the failing light, but its northern end was no more than 1/2 a mile from where they stood, and beyond the stony ridges that enclosed the valley and the water's edge, there was a rim of open ground. They hurried forward, for they had still a mile or 2 to go before they could reach the point on the far shore that Gandalf was making for, and then he still had to find the doors. When they came to the northernmost corner of the lake, they found a narrow creek that barred their way. It was green and stagnant, thrust out like a slimy arm towards the enclosing hills. Gimli strode forward undeterred, and found that the water was shallow, no more than ankle-deep at the edge. Behind him they walked in file, treading their way with care, for under the weedy pools were sliding and greasy stones, and footing was treacherous. Frodo shuddered with disgust at the touch of the dark, unclean water on his feet. Hobbits don't wear shoes, by the way. They've been trudging through the snow. I was thinking of that when they were up on Caradhras. The poor hobbit feet. As Sam, The last of the company led Bill up on to the dry ground at the far side. There came a soft sound, a swish, followed by a plop, as if a fish had disturbed the still surface of the water. Turning quickly, they saw ripples, black-edged with shadow in the waning light. Great rings were widening outwards from a point far out in the lake. There was a bubbling noise, and then silence. The dusk deepened, and the last gleams of the sunset were veiled in cloud. Gandalf now pressed on at a great pace, and the others followed as quickly as they could. They reached the strip of dry land between the lake and the cliffs. It was narrow, often hardly a dozen yards across, and encumbered with fallen rock and stones, but they found a way, hugging the cliff, and keeping far from the dark water as they might. A mile southwards along the shore, they came upon holly trees. Stumps and dead boughs were rotting in the shallows, the remains, of it seemed, of old thickets, or of a hedge that had once lined the road across the drowned valley. But close under the cliff there stood, still strong and living, 2 tall trees, larger than any trees of holly that Frodo had ever seen or imagined. Their great roots spread from the wall to the water. Under the looming cliffs they had looked like mere bushes when seen far off from the top of the stair, but now they towered overhead, stiff, dark, and silent, throwing deep night shadows about their feet, standing like sentinel pillars at the end of the road. "Well, here we are at last," said Gandalf. Here the elven way from Holland ended. Holly was the token of the people of that land, and they planted it here to mark the end of their domain, for the west door was made chiefly for their use and their traffic with the lords of Moria. Those were happier days, when there was still close friendship at times between the folk of different race, even between dwarves and elves. "It was not the fault of the dwarves that friendship waned," said Gimli. "I have not heard it was the fault of the elves," said Legolas. "I have heard both," said Gandalf, "and I will not give judgment now, but I beg you two, Legolas and Gimli, at least to be friends, and to help me. I need both of you. The doors are shut and hidden, and the sooner we find them, the better. Night is at hand." Turning to the others, he said, "While I am searching, will you each make ready to enter the mines? For here I fear we must say farewell to our good beast of burden. You must lay aside as much of the stuff that we brought against bitter weather. You will not need it inside, nor, I hope, when we come through and journey on down into the south. Instead, each of us must take a share of what the pony carried, especially the food and the water-skins." "But you can't leave poor old Bill behind in this forsaken place, Mr. Gandalf," cried Sam, angry and distressed. "I won't have it, and that's flat, after he's come so far and all." "I am sorry, Sam," said the wizard, "but when the door opens, I do not think you will be able to drag your Bill inside into the long dark of Moria. You will have to choose between Bill and your master." "He'd follow Mr. Frodo into a dragon's den if I let him," protested Sam. "There'll be nothing short of murder to turn him loose with all those wolves about." "It will be short of murder, I hope," said Gandalf. He laid his hand on the pony's head and spoke in a low voice. "Go with words of guard and guiding on you," he said. "You are a wise beast and have learned much in Rivendell. Make your ways to places where you can find grass, and so come in time to Elrond's house, or wherever you wish to go. There, Sam. He will have quite as much chance of escaping wolves and getting home as we have." Sam stood sullenly by the pony and returned no answer. Bill, seeming to understand well what was going on, nuzzled up to him, putting his nose into Sam's ear. Sam burst into tears and fumbled with the straps, unlading all the pony's packs and throwing them on the ground. The others sorted out the goods, making a pile of all that could be left behind and dividing up the rest. When this was done, they turned to watch Gandalf. He appeared to have done nothing. He was standing between the 2 trees, gazing at the blank wall of the cliff, as if he would bore a hole into it with his eyes. Gimli was wandering about, tapping the stone here and there with his axe. Legolas was pressed against the rock as if listening. "Well, here we are already," said Merry. But where are the doors? I can't see any sign of them. Dwarf doors are not made to be seen when shut, said Gimli. They are invisible, and their own masters cannot find them or open them if their secret is forgotten. But this door was not made to be a secret known only to dwarves, said Gandalf, suddenly coming to life and turning around, unless things are altogether changed. Eyes that know what to look for may discover the signs. He walked forward to the wall. Right between the shadow of the trees there was a smooth space, and over this he passed his hands to and fro, muttering words under his breath. Then he stepped back. Look, he said. Can you see anything now? The moon now shone upon the gray face of the rock, but they could see nothing else for a while. Then, slowly on the surface, where the wizard's hand had passed, faint lines appeared, like slender veins of silver running in the stone. At first they were no more than pale gossamer threads, so fine that they only twinkled fitfully where the moon caught them, but steadily they grew broader and clearer until their design could be guessed. At the top, as high as Gandalf could reach, was an arch of interlacing letters in an elvish character. Below, though the threads were in places blurred or broken, the outline could be seen of an anvil and a hammer surmounted by a crown with 7 stars. Beneath these again were 2 trees, each bearing crescent moons. More clearly than all else there shone forth in the middle of the door a single star with many rays. "These are the emblems of Durin," cried Gimli. "And there is the tree of the High Elves," said Legolas. "And the star of the house of Feanor," said Gandalf. "They are wrought in Ithilden, that mirrors only starlight and moonlight, and sleeps until it is touched by one who speaks words now long forgotten in Middle-earth. It is long since I heard them, and I thought deeply before I could recall them to my mind." "What does the writing say?" asked Frodo, who was trying to decipher the inscription on the arch. "I thought I knew the elf letters, but I cannot read these. And it's probably because they're written in, old Elvish." "The words are in the elven tongue of the west of Middle-earth in the elder days," answered Gandalf. "But they do not say anything of importance to us. They say only, 'The doors of Durin, Lord of Moria, speak, friend, and enter.' And underneath, small and faint, is written, 'I, Narvi, made them. Celebrimbor of Hollin drew these signs.'" Celebrimbor? I can't remember if we meet him later. I didn't Anyway, well, if we do, I'll have to remember. Hollin. "What does it mean, 'Speak, friend, and enter'?" asked Merry. "That is plain enough," said Gimli. "If you are a friend, speak the password, and the doors will open, and you can enter." "Yes," said Gandalf. "These doors are probably governed by words. Some dwarf gates will open only at special times, or for particular persons, and some have locks and keys that are still needed when all necessary times and words are known. These doors have no keys. In the days of Durin they were not secret. They usually stood open, and door wards set here. But if they were shut, any who knew the opening word could speak it and pass in. At least, so it is recorded, is it not, Gimli?" "It is," said the dwarf, "but what the word is not remembered. Narvi and his craft and all his kindred have vanished from the earth." "But do not you know the word, Gandalf?" asked Boromir in surprise. "No," said the wizard. The others looked dismayed. Only Aragorn, who knew Gandalf well, remained silent and unmoved. "Then what is the use of bringing us to this accursed spot?" cried Boromir, glancing back with a shudder at the dark water. "You told us that you have once passed through the mines. How could that be if you did not know how to enter?" "The answer to your first question, Boromir," said the wizard, "is that I do not know the word yet. But we shall soon see. And," he added, with a glint in his eyes under the bristling brows, "you may ask what is the use of my deeds when they are proven useless. As for your other question, do you doubt my tale? Or have you no wits left? I did not enter this way. I came from the east." Okay, I gotta take a quick peek at we got a little illustration here of the doors of Moria. There's some, extra scraggly Elvish letters at, the top corners, which I'm not going to worry about trying to remember how to read. It's very cute. Would make a good tattoo. Okay. If you wish to know, I will tell you that these doors open outwards. From inside you may thrust them open with your hands. From the outside nothing will move them save the spell of command. They cannot be forced inwards. What are you going to do then? Asked Pippin, undaunted by the wizard's bristling brows. Knock on the doors with your head, Peregrine Took, said Gandalf. But if that does not shatter them, I am allowed a little peace from foolish questions. I will seek for the opening words. I once knew every spell in all the tongues of elves, or men, or orcs. Orcs have spells? This implies orcs have spells. I mean, of course they would, but... that was ever used for such a purpose. I can still remember 10 score of them without searching in my mind, but only a few trials, I think, will be needed, and I shall not have to call on Gimli for words of the secret dwarf tongue that they teach to none. The opening words were Elvish, like the writing on the arch, that seems certain. He stepped up to the rock again, and lightly touched with his staff the silver star in the middle beneath the sign of the anvil. I'm going to have to read so much Elvish in this chapter, I think. Anon Evelyn, Edro Hiamen, Fenes Nogothrim, Lasto Bethlamen, he said in a commanding voice. The silver lines faded, but the blank gray stone did not stir. Many times he repeated these words in different order, or varied them. Then he tried other spells, one after another, speaking now faster and louder, now soft and slow. Then he spoke many single words of Elvish speech. Nothing happened. The cliff towered into the night. The countless stars were kindled. The wind blew cold, and the doors stood fast. Again Gandalf approached the wall, and lifting up his arms, he spoke in tones of command and rising wrath. Edro, Edro, he cried, and struck the rock with his staff. Open, open, he shouted, and followed it with the same command in every language that had ever been spoken in the west of Middle-earth. Then he threw his staff upon the ground and sat in silence. Well, at least I'm going to be well hydrated. At that moment, from far off, the wind bore to their listening ears the howling of wolves. Bill the pony started in fear, and Sam sprang to his side and whispered softly to him. Do not let him run away, said Boromir. It seems that we shall need him still if the wolves do not find us. How I hate this foul pool. He stooped, and picking up a large stone, cast it far into the dark water. The stone vanished with a soft slap, but at the same instant there was a swish and a bubble. Great rippling rings formed on the surface out beyond where the stone had fallen, and they moved slowly towards the foot of the cliff. Why did you do that, Boromir? Said Frodo. I hate this place too, and I'm afraid. I don't know of what, not of wolves, or of the dark behind the doors, but of something else. I'm afraid of the pool. Don't disturb it. Wish we could get away, said Merry. Why doesn't Gandalf do something quick? Said Pippin. Gandalf took no notice of them. He sat with his head bowed, either in despair or in anxious thought. The mournful howling of the wolves was heard again. The ripples on the water grew and came close. Some were already lapping up on the shore. With a suddenness that startled them all, the wizard sprang to his feet. He was laughing. I have it, he cried. Of course, absurdly simple, like most riddles when you see the answer. Picking up his staff, he stood before the rock and said in a clear voice, Melon. Melon, hee. The star shone out briefly and faded again. And then silently a great doorway was outlined, though not a crack or joint had been visible before. Slowly, it divided in the middle and swung outwards inch by inch until both doors lay back against the wall. Through the opening, a shadowy stair could be seen climbing steeply up, but beyond the lower steps the darkness was deeper than the night. The company stared in wonder. "I was wrong after all," said Gandalf, "and Gimli too. Merry, of all people, was on the right track. The opening word was inscribed on the archway all the time. The translation should have been, say, friend, in quotation marks, and enter. I had only to speak the Elvish word for friend, and the doors opened. Quite simple. Too simple for a learned lore master in these suspicious days. Those were happier times. Now let us go." He strode forward and set his foot on the lowest step, but at that moment several things happened. Frodo felt something seize him by the ankle, and he fell with a cry. Bill the pony gave a wild neigh of fear and turned tail and dashed away along the lakeside into the darkness. Sam leapt after him, and then hearing Frodo's cry, he ran back again, weeping and cursing. The others swung round and saw the waters of the lake seething, as if a host of snakes was swimming up from the southern end. Out from the water, a long sinuous tentacle had crawled. It was pale green and luminous and wet. It came from the water, of course it's wet. Its fingered end had hold of Frodo's foot and was dragging him into the water. Sam, on his knees, was now slashing at it with a knife. The arm let go of Frodo, and Sam pulled him away, crying out for help. 20 other arms came ripping out. The dark water, boiled, and there was a hideous stench. "Into the gateway, up the stairs, quick!" shouted Gandalf, leaping back. Rousing them from the horror that seemed to have rooted all but Sam to the ground where they stood, he drove them forward. They were just in time. Sam and Frodo were only a few steps up, and Gandalf had just begun to climb, when the groping tentacles writhed across the narrow shore and fingered the cliff wall and the doors. One came wriggling over the threshold, glistening in the starlight. Gandalf turned and paused. If he was considering what word would close the gates again from within, there was no need. Many coiling arms seized the doors on either end, and with the horrible strength swung them round. With a shattering echo they slammed, and all light was lost. A noise of rending and crashing came dully through the ponderous stone. Sam, clinging to Frodo's arms, collapsed on a step in the black darkness. "Poor old Bill," he said in a choking voice. "Poor old Bill, wolves and snakes, but the snakes were too much for him. I had to choose, Mr. Frodo. I had to come with you." They heard Gandalf go back down the steps and thrust his staff against the doors. There was a quiver in the stone, and the stairs trembled, but the doors did not open. "Uh-oh." "Well, well," said the wizard. "The passage is blocked behind us now, and there is only one way out, on the other side of the mountains. I fear from the sounds that boulders have been piled up, and the trees uprooted and thrown across the gate. I'm sorry, for the trees were beautiful, and it stood so long. I felt that something horrible was near from the moment my foot first touched the water," said Frodo. "What was that thing, or were there many of them?" "I do not know," answered Gandalf, "but the arms were all guided by one purpose. Something has crept, or has been driven out of the dark waters under the mountains. There were older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world." He did not speak aloud his thought that whatever it was dwelt in the lake, had seized on Frodo first among all the company. Boromir muttered under his breath, but the echoing stone magnified the sound to a hoarse whisper that all could hear. "In the deep places of the world, and thither we are going against my wish. Who will lead us now in this deadly dark?" "I will," said Gandalf, "and Gimli shall walk with me. Follow my staff." As the wizard passed on ahead up the great steps, he held his staff aloft, and from its tip there came a faint radiance. The wide stairway was sound and undamaged. 200 steps they counted, broad and shallow, and at the top they found an arched passage with a level floor leading on into the dark. "Let us sit and rest and have something to eat here on the landing, since we can't find a dining room," said Frodo. He began to shake off the terror of the clutching arm, and suddenly he felt extremely hungry. "I feel hungry myself." The proposal was welcomed by all, and they sat down on the upper steps, dim figures in the gloom. After they had eaten, Gandalf gave them each a third sip of the Mirror of Rivendell. "It will not last much longer, I'm afraid," he said, "but I think we all need it after the horror at the gate. And unless we have great luck, we shall need all that is left before we see the other side. Go carefully with the water, too. There are many streams and wells in the mines, but they should not be touched. We may not have a chance of filling our skins and bottles till we come down into Dimrill Dale." "How long is that going to take?" asked Frodo. "I cannot say," answered Gandalf. "It depends on many chances, but going straight without mishap or losing our way, we shall take 3 or 4 marches, I expect. It cannot be less than 40 miles from West Door to Eastgate in a direct line, and the road may wind much." After only a brief rest, they started their way again. All were eager to get the journey over as quickly as possible, and were willing, tired as they were, to go on as marching still for several hours. Gandalf walked in front, as before. In his left hand he held up his glimmering staff, the light of which just showed the ground before his feet. In his right he held his sword Glamdring. Behind him came Gimli, his eyes glinting in the dim light as he turned his head from side to side. Behind the dwarf walked Frodo, and he had drawn the short sword Sting. No gleam came from the blades of Sting or of Glamdring, and that was some comfort, for being the work of elvish smiths in the elder days, these swords shone with a cold light if any orcs were near at hand. Behind Frodo went Sam, and after him Legolas and the young hobbits, and Boromir. In the dark, at the rear, grim and silent, walked Aragorn. The passage twisted round a few turns, and then began to descend. It went steadily down for a long while before it became level once again. The air grew hot and stifling, but it was not foul, and at times they felt currents of cooler air upon their faces, issuing from half-guessed openings in the walls. There were many of these. In the pale ray of the wizard's staff, Frodo caught glimpses of stairs and arches, and of other passages and tunnels sloping up or running steeply down, and opening blankly dark on either side. It was bewildering beyond hope or remembering. Gimli aided Gandalf very little, except by his stout courage. At least he was not, as were most of the others, troubled by the mere darkness in itself. Often the wizard consulted him at points where the choice of way was doubtful, but it was always Gandalf who had the final word. The mines of Moria were vast and intricate beyond the imagination of Gimli, Glóin's son, dwarf of the mountain race though he was. To Gandalf, the far-off memories of a journey long before were now of little help, but even in the gloom, and despite all windings of the road, he knew whither he wished to go, and he did not falter, as long as there was a path that led towards his goal. "Do not be afraid," said Aragorn. There was a pause longer than usual, and Gandalf and Gimli were whispering together. The others were crowded behind, waiting anxiously. "Do not be afraid. I have been with him on many a journey, if never on one so dark, and there are tales of Rivendell of greater deeds of his than any that I have seen. He will not go astray, if there is any path to find. He has led us here against our fears, but he will lead us out again, at whatever cost to himself. He is surer of finding the way home in a blind night than the cats of Queen Beruthiel." It was well for the company that they had such a guide. They had no fuel, nor any means of making torches. In the desperate scramble of the doors, many things had been left behind, but without any light they would soon have come to grief. There were not only many roads to choose from, there were also, in many places, holes and pitfalls, and dark wells beside the path in which their passing feet echoed. There were fissures and chasms in the walls and floor, and every now and then a crack would open right before their feet. The widest was more than 7 feet across, and it was long before Pippin could summon enough courage to leap over the dreadful gap. The noise of churning water came from far below, as if some great mill wheel was turning in the depths. "Rope," muttered Sam. "I knew I'd want it if I hadn't got it." As these dangers became more frequent, their march became slower. Already they seemed to have been trampling on endlessly to the mountain's roots. They were more than weary, and yet there seemed no comfort in the thought of halting anywhere. Frodo's spirits had risen for a while after his escape, and after food and a draught of the cordial, but now a deep uneasiness, growing to dread, crept over him again. Though he had been healed at Rivendell of the knife stroke, that grim wound had not been without effect. His senses were sharper and more aware of things that could not be seen. One sign of the change that he soon had noticed was that he could see more in the dark than any of his companions, save perhaps Gandalf. And he was in any case the bearer of the ring. It hung upon its chain against his breast, and at whiles it seemed a heavy weight. He felt the certainty of evil ahead and of evil following, but he said nothing. He gripped tighter on the hilt of his sword and went on doggedly. The company behind him spoke seldom, and then only in hurried whispers. There was no sound but the sound of their own feet, the dull stump of Gimli's dwarf boots, the heavy tread of Boromir, the light step of Legolas, the soft, scarce-heard patter of hobbit feet, and in the rear the slow, firm footfalls of Aragorn with his long stride. When they halted for a moment, they heard nothing at all, unless it was occasionally a faint trickle and drip of unseen water. Yet Frodo began to hear, or to imagine that he heard, something else, like a faint fall of soft, bare feet. It was never loud enough or near enough for him to feel certain that he heard it, but once it had started, it never stopped, while the company was moving. But it was not an echo, for when they halted it pattered on for a while all by itself, and then grew still. And I need another couple seconds to get some more water. Oh, and I'm back. It was after nightfall when they had entered the mines. They had been going for several hours with only brief halts when Gandalf came to his first serious check. Before him stood a wide dark arch opening into 3 passages. All led in the same general direction eastwards, but the left-hand passage plunged down, while the right-hand climbed up, and the middle way seemed to run on, smooth and level, but very narrow. "I have no memory of this place at all," said Gandalf, standing uncertainly under the arch. He held up his staff in the hope of finding some marks or inscriptions that might help his choice, but nothing of the kind was to be seen. "I'm too weary to decide," he said, shaking his head, "and I expect that you are all as weary as I am, or wearier. We had better halt here for what is left of the night. You know what I mean. In here it is ever dark, but outside the late moon is rising westward and the middle night has passed." "Poor old Bill," said Sam. "I wonder where he is. I hope those wolves haven't gotten him yet." To the end of the great arch they found a stone door. It was half closed, but swung back easily with a gentle thrust. Beyond there seemed to lie a wide chamber cut into the rock. "Steady, steady," cried Gandalf as Merry and Pippin pushed forward, glad to find a place where they could rest with at least more feeling of shelter than the open passage. "Steady, you do not know what is yet inside. I will go first." He went in cautiously, and the others filed behind. "There," he said, pointing with his staff to the middle of the floor. Before his feet they saw a large round hole, like the mouth of a well. Broken and rusty chains lay at the edge and trailed down into the pit. Fragments of stone lay nearby. One of you might have fallen in, and still be wondering when you were going to strike the bottom, said Aragorn to Merry. Let the guide go first, while you have one. This seems to have been a guard room made for the watching of the 3 passages, said Gimli. That hole was plainly a well for the guard's use, covered with a stone lid, but the lid is broken, and we must all take care in the dark. Pippin felt curiously attracted by the well. Ah, okay. While the others were unrolling blankets and making beds against the walls of the chamber, as far as possible from the hole in the floor, he crept to the edge and peered over. A chill air seemed to strike his face, rising from invisible depths. Moved by a sudden impulse, he groped for a loose stone and let it drop. I do understand that impulse. I always like to drop things off of the overpasses when I'm in Fallout. He felt his heart beat many times before there was any sound. Then far below, as if the stone had fallen into deep water in some cavernous place, there came a plunk, very distant, but magnified and repeated in the hollow shaft. "What's that?" cried Gandalf. He was relieved when Pippin confessed what he had done, but he was angry, and Pippin could see his eye glinting. "Fool of a Took," he growled. "This is a serious journey, not a hoblet walking party. Throw yourself in next time, and then you will be no further nuisance. Now be quiet." Nothing more was heard for several minutes, but then there came out of the depths faint knocks. Tom tap, tap Tom. I don't know what that... Anyway, they stopped, and when the echoes had died away, they were repeated. Tap Tom, Tom tap, tap tap Tom. They sounded disquietingly like signals of some sort, but after a while the knocking died away and was not heard again. There was the sound of a hammer, I've never heard one, said Gimli. Yes, said Gandalf, and I do not like it. It may have nothing to do with Peregrine's foolish stone, but probably something has been disturbed that would have been better left quiet. Pray, do nothing of the kind again. Let us hope that we shall get some rest without further trouble. You, Pippin, can go on the first watch as a reward, he growled, as he rolled himself in a blanket. Honestly, it's better the first watch than the third. Pippin sat miserably by the door in the pitch dark, but he kept turning round, fearing that some unknown thing would crawl up out of the well. He wished he could cover the hole, if only with a blanket, but he dared not move or go near it, even though Gandalf seemed to be asleep. Actually, Gandalf was awake, though lying still and silent. He was deep in thought, trying to recall every memory of his former journey in the mines, and considering anxiously the next course that he should take. A false turn now might be disastrous. After an hour he rose up and came over to Pippin. "Get into a corner and have a sleep, my lad," he said in a kindly tone. "You want to sleep, I expect. I cannot get a wink, so I may as well do the watching." I know what is the matter with me," he muttered, as he sat down by the door. "I need smoke. I have not tasted it since the morning before the snowstorm." The last thing that Pippin saw, as sleep took him, was a dark glimpse of the old wizard, huddled on the floor, shielding a glowing chip in his gnarled hands between his knees. The flicker, for a moment, showed his sharp nose and the puff of smoke. We've got to be nearing the end of the chapter. Oh, great! I get to read another long song. Yep, we'll have a few more pages left though. But my throat is out of practice. It was Gandalf who roused them all from sleep. He had sat and watched all alone for about 6 hours, and had let the others rest. And in the watches I have made up my mind, he said. I do not like the feel of the middle way, and I do not like the smell of the left-hand way. There's foul air down there, I am no guide. I shall take the right-hand passage. It is time we began to climb up again. For 8 dark hours, not counting 2 brief halts, they marched on, and they met no danger, and heard nothing, and saw nothing but the faint gleam of the wizard's light, bobbing like a will-o'-the-wisp in front of them. The passage they had chosen wound steadily upwards. As far as they could judge, it went in great mounting curves, and as it rose, it grew loftier and wider. There were now no openings to other galleries or tunnels on either side, and the floor was level and sound, without pits or cracks. Evidently they had struck what once had been an important road, and they went forward quicker than they had done on their first march. In this way they advanced some 15 miles, measured in a direct line east, though they must have actually walked 20 miles or more. As the road climbed upwards, Frodo's spirits rose a little, but he still felt oppressed, and at times he heard, or thought he heard, away behind the company, and beyond the fallen patter of their feet, a following footstep that was not an echo. They had marched as far as the hobbits could endure without a rest, and they were all thinking of a place where they could sleep, when suddenly the walls to the right and left vanished. They seemed to have passed through some arched doorway into a black and empty space. There was a great draught of warmer air behind them, and before them the darkness was cold on their faces. They halted and crowded anxiously together. Gandalf seemed pleased. I chose the right way, he said. At last we are coming to the habitable parts, and I guess that we are not far now from the eastern side. We are high up, a good deal higher than the Dimrill Gate, unless I am mistaken. From the feeling of the air, we must be in a wide hall. I will now risk a little real light. He raised his staff, and for a brief instant there was a blaze like a flash of lightning. Great shadows sprang up and fled, and for a second they saw a vast roof far above their heads, upheld by many pillars hewn of stone. Before them, and on either side, stretched a huge empty hall. Its black walls, polished and smooth as glass, flashed and glittered. 3 other entrances they saw, dark black arches, one straight before them eastwards, and one on either side. Then the light went out. It is all I shall venture on for the present, said Gandalf. There used to be great windows on the mountain side, and shafts heading out to light in the upper reaches of the mines. I think we have reached them now, but it is night outside again, and we cannot tell until morning. If I am right, tomorrow we may actually see the morning peeping in, but in the meanwhile we had better go on further. Let us rest if we can. Things have gone well so far, and the greater part of the dark road is over. But we are not through yet, and it is a long way down to the gates that open on the world. The company spent that night in the great cavernous hall, huddled close together in a corner to escape the draught. It seemed to be a steady inflow of chill air through the eastern archway. All about them, as they lay hung in the darkness, hollow and immense, and they were oppressed by the loneliness and the vastness of the dolven halls and endlessly branching stairs and passages. The wildest imaginings that dark rumor had ever suggested to the hobbits fell altogether short of the actual dread and wonder of Moria. There must have been a mighty crowd of dwarfs here at one time, said Sam, and every one of them busier than badgers for 500 years to make all this, and most in hard rock, too. What did they do it all for? They didn't live in these darksome holes, surely. These are not holes, said Gimli. This is the great realm and city of the Dwarrodelf, and of old it was not darksome, but full of light and splendor, as is still remembered in our songs. He rose, and standing in the dark, he began to chant in a deep voice, while the echoes ran away into the roof. Oh my goodness! I actually know this song. I'm not gonna sing it though. Oh, this is the song of Durin. The world was young, the mountains green, no stain yet on the moon was seen. No words were laid on stream or stone when Durin woke and walked alone. He named the nameless hills and dells, he drank from yet untasted wells. He stooped and looked in Mirromere, and saw a crown of stars appear as gems upon a silver thread above the shadow of his head. The world was fair, the mountains tall, in elder days, before the fall of mighty kings in Nargothrond and Gondolin, who now beyond the western seas have passed away. The world was fair in Durin's day. A king he was on carven throne, in many pillared halls of stone, with golden roof and silver floor, and runes of power upon the door. The light of sun and star and moon, in shining lamps of crystal hewn, undimmed by cloud or shade of night, there shone forever fair and bright. Their hammer on the anvil smote, their chisel clove and graver wrote. Their forge was blade and bound was hilt, the delver mind the mason built. Their beryl pearl and opal pale, and metal wrought like fish's mail. Buckler and corslet, axe and sword, and shining spears were laid in hoard. Unwearied then were Durin's folk, beneath the mountain music woke. The harpers harped, the minstrel sang, and all the gates the trumpets rang. The world is grey, the mountain old, the forge's fire is ashen cold. No harp is rung, no hammer falls, the darkness dwells in Durin's halls. The shadow lies upon his tomb, in Moria and Khazad-dûm. But still the sunken stars appear in dark and windless Mirromere. There lies his crown in water deep, till Durin wakes again from sleep. I like that, said Sam. I should like to learn it, in Moria and Khazad-dûm. But it makes the darkness seem heavier, thinking of all those lamps. There are piles of jewels and gold lying about here still. Gimli was silent. Having sung his song, he would say no more. Piles of jewels, said Gandalf. No, the orcs have often plundered Moria. There's nothing left in the upper halls, and since the dwarves fled, no one dares seek the shafts and treasuries down in the deep places. They are drowned in water, or in shadow of fear. And what do the dwarves want to come back for? Asked Sam. For Mithril, answered Gandalf. The wealth of Moria was not in gold and jewels, the toys of the dwarves, nor in iron their servant. Such things they found here, it is true, especially iron, but they did not need to delve for them. All things that they desired they could obtain in traffic, for here alone in the world was found Moria silver, or true silver, as some have called it. Mithril is the elvish name. The dwarves have a name which they do not tell. It is worth 10 times that of gold, and now it is beyond price, for little is left above ground. And even the orcs dare not delve for it here. The loads lead away north towards Kerithras, down into darkness. I don't know what that means. Loads? Loads? L-O-D-E-S? I don't know. The dwarves tell no tale, but even as Mithril was the foundation of their wealth, so also was it their destruction. They delved too greedily and too deep, and disturbed that from which they fled, Durin's bane. Of what they brought to light, the orcs have gathered nearly all, and given it in tribute to Sauron, who covets it. Mithril. All folk desired it. It could be beaten like copper and polished like grass. Grass? Glass! And the dwarves could make of it a metal, light and yet harder than tempered steel. Its beauty was like to that of common silver, but the beauty of Mithril did not tarnish or grow dim. The elves dearly loved it, and among many uses they made of it Ithildin. Star Moon, which you saw upon the doors. Bilbo had a corslet of mithril rings that Thorin gave him. I wonder what has become of it. Gathering dust, still in Mitchell Delving Museum, I suppose. What? Cried Gimli, startling out of his silence. A corslet of Moria silver? That was a kingly gift. Yes, said Gandalf. I never told him, but its worth was greater than the value of the whole Shire and everything in it. Frodo said nothing, but he put his hand under his tunic and touched the rings of his mail shirt. He felt staggered to think that he had been walking about with the price of the Shire under his jacket. Had Bilbo known? He felt no doubt that Bilbo knew quite well. It was indeed a kingly gift. But now his thoughts had been carried away from the dark mines to Rivendell, to Bilbo, and to Bag End in the days when Bilbo was still there. He wished with all his heart that he was back there, and in those days, mowing the lawn or pottering among the flowers, and that he had never heard of Moria, or Mithril, or the ring. That was a good sentence. That's a damn good sentence. I was actually sort of half thinking a thing, and it totally... Oh, yeah! So there were suspicions online that because the Mithril corslet is such a kingly gift, that it was supposedly given as a gift to a young elvish prince. And the only young elvish prince that we know of is Legolas. So there are suspicions that this is like child Legolas's first armor. God, how many more pages? Is my throat gonna last? Oh, wow. One more page, basically. Page and a half. A deep silence fell. One by one, the others fell asleep. Frodo was on guard. As if it were a breath that came through unseen doors and out of deep places, dread came over him. His hands were cold and his brow damp. He listened. All his mind was given to listening, and nothing else for 2 slow hours. But he heard no sound, and not even the imagined echo of a footfall. His watch was nearly over, when far off, where he guessed that the western archway stood, he fancied that he could see 2 pale points of light, almost like luminous eyes. He started. His head had nodded. I must have nearly fallen asleep on guard, he thought. I was on the edge of a dream. He stood and rubbed his eyes, and remained standing, peering into the dark, until he was relieved by Legolas. When he lay down, he quickly went to sleep, but it seemed to him that the dream went on. He heard whispers, and saw 2 pale points of light approaching slowly. He woke and found that the others were speaking softly near him, and that a dim light was falling on his face. High up above the eastern archway, through a shaft in the roof, came a long pale gleam, and across the hall, through the northern arch, light also glimmered faint and distantly. Frodo sat up. "Good morning," said Gandalf. "For morning it is again at last. I was right, you see. We are high up on the east side of Moria. Before today is over, we ought to find the great gates and see the waters of Miromir lying in the Dimril Dale before us." "I shall be glad," said Gimli. "I have looked on Moria, and it is very great, but it has become dark and dreadful. We have found no sign of my kindred. I doubt now that Balin ever came here." After they had breakfasted, Gandalf decided to go on again at once. "We are tired, but we shall rest better when we are outside," he said. "I think that none of us will wish to spend another night in Moria." "No, indeed," said Boromir. "Which way shall we take? Yonder eastward arch?" "Maybe," said Gandalf. "But I do not know yet exactly where we are. Unless I am quite astray, I guess that we are above and to the north of the great gates, and it may not be easy to find the right road down to them. The eastern arch will probably prove to be the way that we must take, but before we make up our minds, we ought to look about us. Let us go towards that light in the north door. If we could find a window, it would help, but I fear that the light comes only down deep shafts." Following his lead, the company passed under the northern arch. They found themselves in a wide corridor. As they went along it, the glimmer grew stronger, and they saw that it came through a doorway on their right. It It was high and flat-topped, and the stone door was still upon its hinges, standing half open. Beyond it was a large square chamber. It was dimly lit, but to their eyes, after so long a time in the dark, it seemed dazzlingly bright, and they blinked as they entered. Their feet disturbed a deep dust on the floor and stumbled among things lying in the doorway whose shapes they could not at first make out. The chamber was lit by a wide shaft high in the further eastern wall. It slanted upwards, and far above, a small square patch of blue sky could be seen. The light of the shaft fell directly on a table in the middle of the room, a single oblong block about 2 feet high, upon which was laid a great slab of white stone. "It looks like a tomb," muttered Frodo, and bent forward with a curious sense of foreboding to look more closely at it. Gandalf came quickly to his side. On the slab, runes were deeply graven. And then there is a drawing of a plaque with a bunch of dwarf runes that I don't remember how to read. Okay, yeah. Nope. "These are Darin's runes, such as were used of old in Moria," said Gandalf. "Here is written in the tongue of men and dwarves, Balin, son of Fundin, Lord of Moria." "He is dead, then," said Frodo. "I feared it was so." Gimli cast his hood over his face. And that's it. That's the end of Chapter 4. It is 11:42, and my throat hurts, and I've been chatting all throughout these 2 chapters here. So I think we're about good for a little rest and a sleep ourselves. I'm gonna leave it at that. And I'm just gonna go straight to the closing out music. Have a good night, everybody. Hopefully I will keep on my shit, and we will get to do this again next Sunday. But until then, good night.